I am here to help you guys learn about Bali, help you be educated, help you learn the things that I didn't know and I wish I would have known before I invested into Bali. I love investing into Bali. I love the whole idea of having multiple homes around the world, and Bali being one of them. So I would love to have other people in this journey doing the same things and having multiple homes in Bali, around the world, if this is that really floats your boat. And this podcast is there to just help you navigate the Bali opportunity. The legal way that I heard you say it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is really to have a company that has the ability to register this villa as a business, right? That you're earning income, so you can eligibly pay tax on this through tourism tax is one form of tax, and then there's the company tax, right? What the investors are sometimes confused about is they're coming to us developers or us as the management team. We will take care of the management. In those cases, they're like, can't you guys just have the company and the management and you just pay the tourism tax under your company, and then we just get, which is avoiding obviously the company tax if they don't have a company. Can they not just do that?
I argue that they cannot, and there's a few reasons for that. Indonesia doesn't recognize expats to do business as private persons, which you then are doing. From a tax perspective, the tax office kind of don't get into the legalities of it and kind of don't see that as their issue to deal with. So they just collect a withhold taxes of 20% and that's it. We're starting to see on the other end when people then repatriate money home from businesses like that, in particular in some Scandinavian countries and also Australia, where they then argue that you have not taken advantage in a proper way of the tax treaty that exists between Indonesia and Australia, or Indonesia and Sweden, and they consider it full income and you get full tax, you get a double taxation. The last argument on that is if you ever have any sort of legal disputes, let's say between the management and the owner of the unit, or landlords or access roads or whatever it is, it's a difficult structure to take to court because the court will be confused. Who are you? What are you? Do you exist? I'm not a legal entity. I don't have a stay permit. I'm kind of just, floating around here, coming and going every now and then and earning money from this unit.
Yes.
So I don't recommend that. Again, it's become a trend and a massive trend, and I think, and hopefully that the government enforces these lease agreements to actually be registered with BPN or the Agrarian Office, and that whole problem will go away.
Yes. I think with the new way of registering villas for a Pondok Wisata, there is a force of now NPWPDs that need to be now presented. That's something new that before we didn't need to do last year, which is forcing people to say an NPWPD only can be from a company.
Yeah.
Now, who that company is and who that entity is can be anybody still. It could be me, the developer, using an NPWPD to register that particular villa.
Yeah.
So
I think then you get into
who's the taxable person? Who's the taxable
exactly.
entity
What's the
at
tax
the end?
object? What's the tax subject, and so on is what the tax office then look at. So the management company, the villa is the object, and the management company will comply with some tourism taxes, but they're not the owner. The owner then is another level of tax subject.
Yeah. They're just
Personal
taxable
income.
on the percentage of the revenue that they're collecting
Correct.
from that.
Correct.
And they're only liable for that. And maybe they're submitting the tourism tax on the behalf of the owner, but they're not the liable entity. So by not having a company, a lot of people are able to get around this, and it's going to catch up.
The tax office, if you register and pay taxes, they'll call it BUT, Badan Usaha Tetap. So it's not a registered entity, but they just take 20% and they don't look into it. Other institutions may, but if you then kind of have at some stage an audit, tax audit, whatever it is, into the management company or into the complex, if the tax office have findings that they may see as being, by mistakes, you have avoided or not paid some taxes, they can penalize you 200%.
Wow.
If they find it deliberate, they can penalize you 600%. And people sort of play around with, we can just fool around, shut companies, move on.
Yes.
And then 5 years, they don't have the right to look at it again, except if they suspect this to be tax avoidance, which is a criminal act, then they can go on as far back as they want.
Wow.
And I think that is going to be another aspect that will come now with the what we call the core tax system, which is a much more AI-driven and managed tax system, which the tax office or the Ministry of Finance is implementing. So I think that will be the next wave of challenges. And we know by fact there's a lot of people sort of spinning around 4 months here, 4 months in Singapore, 4 months somewhere else, and they try to be, avoiding taxes overall.
What is the tax for an investor that is buying a villa in Bali? There is, my understanding is there's two forms of taxes, the tourism tax and then the company tax, should they have one. Is that correct, or is there, and
I guess there
what is the
is,
percentages?
yeah, so there is taxes on a transaction when you're purchasing a villa, whether that is a title or a lease. If it's a title, then there's a 5% buyer tax and 2.5% seller tax.
Okay.
If it's a lease, then it's a 10% seller tax
Yeah.
only.
Yeah.
In operations, you will have what you refer to as a tourist tax, which is kind of an VAT that the province collect
Yeah.
directly. And then you get into the corporate tax, which have the sort of three different levels of first 3 years, subject to being below 4.8 billion. You pay 0.5% from revenue as corporate tax.
Yeah.
That is now being debated whether PMA should be allowed to do that or not.
Yeah.
Personally, I think they shouldn't, but that's just another implementation from
So
tax office.
PMA cannot
They
can
can.
do it right now, but
So
that was the intention was for individual
it's
level?
meant for SMEs, but
SMEs,
to me, it's like I'm saying, that's not your fault or my fault. That's the government's fault. They
Yeah,
are
for the
just taxing
legislation.
everyone according to the regulations. So the government then needs to go to the Minister of Finance and say, how do we change this if they want to. But then you get into the next level of corporate tax, which is 11% from profit. And if you go beyond 50 billion, which is about 3 million USD, something like that, you are taxed 22% on profit. And then when you take money out of the company, depends on where you're a tax resident. So if you're here, 10%. If you're abroad, 15 to 20. The actual rule is 20%, but most countries will have some kind of tax treaty with Indonesia.
So if you buy a villa, right, and you buy it freehold, it's a different tax. I want to make that really clear, what we just covered. And that's 5.5% on the buyer.
5% buyer.
5% on the buyer, and the
2.5%.
seller will do 2.5% on freehold land, which you have to do through a company.
Yeah.
If you buy a leasehold, which is the more common structure of transaction at the moment, there is a 10% seller tax on the whole transaction, including the land plus the build that you collect as a developer, and you pay 10% of that. After all this is done, the profit, there's also a company tax where you can either pay 0.5% of your revenue if you're under this 4.8 billion for the whole year, or if you went over that for that company, you will be subject to around 11% when you
profit,
go from profit. So that could be whatever your profit number is. Okay, so they're the ways of that people can think. And then after all that, if you take a dividend out of the company after you've paid all your profits, and you're pulling out whatever is left, you'll be individually taxed at your individual level, like any other. It could be 10, it could be 20. It depends on the treaty and where you are a tax resident as an individual. If you're in Saudi Arabia, maybe you have none. Yeah,
so I think that kind of leads to, rather than doing tax avoidance, you do tax planning. So there's a lot of things you can do. Like some people will have an offshore holding, Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai, somewhere. You can have that as an owner of intellectual property, brand names, marketing fees. So quite a bit. Indonesia operates with what they call transfer tax. So they'll have regulations on the percentage of what you're allowed to take out without paying taxes. It's a cost. So that, I would think, is part of tax planning. Another thing that people don't realize, let's say I'm buying a villa from you for 5 billion rupiah and it's a lease. In order to avoid paying full taxes, you'll go and talk to the notary and say, oh, can we just do half? So I pay less, and we figure out how I get the balance to you. That is like shooting me in both the legs. You gain, 50% tax rebate or discount, if you like, which by law is a tax avoidance. But for me, that means on a lease, when I do my bookkeeping and we talk about the 11% profit tax, I can depreciate that lease. So when let's say we have just to keep the figure simple, a 10 years lease, 5 billion, I could depreciate 500 million into the P&L every year, which means I wouldn't have a profit and I don't need to pay taxes. But because I can only book 250 million based on the registered value, I'm losing out. So it's a very short-term thinking. And we also see now more and more that the furniture packages or whatever that people create, tax office don't accept those. If you're into an off plan, you can do a few things. You can have like a land component, you can have a construction agreement, you can have some kind of management consultancy. That's acceptable and fully legal.
Yeah. So really, if for tax planning, it's really important from the beginning, if you're really coming into Indonesia or Bali to tax plan, and maybe talk to someone like yourself from the beginning, set it up so you can actually minimize tax and not tax evasion, but you can plan how to actually pay the least amount but legally.
Be in compliance, and still Indonesian tax regulations are much better than most Western countries. So I don't see the reason for why we should try to circumvent it further. But I think the point that you bring up also have this, like, very few people think of an exit. They look at the entry, I'm going to have good ROIs and beautiful lifestyle and all of that, but they don't think of an exit. So are you going to be here forever? Are you going to be here for 5 years? Is it just an ROI game? Those things I think is important. And that kind of leads back to, like, when we talk to new clients, we say, do your business plan, do some studies, figure out what's going on, reality in the market, what kind of villas work, what kind of areas work, learn about the zoning. Then you get into setting up the company, and then clearly I'm looking for 2 villas in a tourism zone, or I want to have 1 villa in a tourism zone to commercialize. I want to try to get something maybe in a green zone, which you can for my residential purposes. So you have a clear strategy, which then close to eliminate all these issues and challenges that we see.